Hello, everyone. We've added this note to the beginning of all of our original episodes of the podcast to let you know of a few changes that have happened around here and hopefully avoid any confusion for you as listeners. When we began this podcast, it was called Starseed Survival Guide, and most people called me, your host, by my birth name, Erin. Throughout the first 22 episodes, you'll hear me introduce myself as Erin, hear others refer to me as Erin, and hear many references to the name of the show being Starseed Survival Guide. In 2018, more and more folks began calling us Yaya, and in March of 2020, we changed the name of this podcast to Earthside Survival Guide to more accurately reflect our intentions for the show. For a little more of the full story of what these changes mean to us, please check out episode 23, a temple talk where we reflect on where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. We thank you for your patience during this transition, for listening and sharing this journey with us, and most importantly, for allowing us to continue to grow and evolve. Blessings.
And as I call in the east, I walk into the stream. And as I call in the south, I bring water to my mouth. And as I call in the west, the creek swallows my chest. And as I call in the north, I am swallowed by her source.
Greetings, Starseeds, and welcome to the Starseed Survival Guide podcast. I'll be your host, Erin Rivera Merriman, and I'm honored to facilitate a place for us to virtually gather to be seated, activated, and germinated by the infinite well of galactic and terrestrial wisdom that is available to all in every moment. Thank you for hearing the call, for remembering that there is so very much more to life, and showing up to explore the secret, esoteric, mystical, and unorthodox pathways to liberation that are and forever will be open to you and all who seek them with sincerity. We welcome and hail to the guardians and the gatekeepers who dwell eternally in the liminal realms. We humbly beseech your assistance today in opening these portals between the dimensions so that those who have tuned in with this transmission may find themselves able to listen from a deeper place and receive the hybrid medicine and restructuring that the helper spirits who called this broadcast into being so generously provide. May you as sacred listeners hear what you need to hear and discard anything that is not of value to your own stated intentions for your life and the fulfillment of your soul's purpose in the most enjoyable, most beautiful possible way. Starseed Survival Guide is a listener-supported program, and we hope that if you find value in the experience we share here today, that you might consider offering support by visiting us online at www.activeculturefamily.com and making a purchase or donation. Many blessings to you on your journey, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, it's me Erin, and I'm here today with women's leadership mentor Luna Love. Luna assists those called to be change makers in achieving clear vision for their lives by providing supportive, life-promoting experiences, practical tools, and spiritual wisdom to align one's divine essence, authentic expression, and life purpose through the power of self-awareness and love. Welcome, Luna. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Well, I've always been curious about your name, so I'd love to start there and just ask if there's a good story behind the name Luna Love.
Yeah. No one's ever asked me this. That's great. I mean, in an interview, at least people ask me all the time. My birth name is Whitney Page Crittenden, and I never really resonated with it. Whitney means white island, which like some people think of as like very beautiful, but I've always thought of this like segregated island where like only whites lived. It's a very British name. And yeah, I was actually named after Whitney Houston.
Oh.
And The Greatest Love of All, that song was like super popular the year I was born, and my name was supposed to be Ashley Page, and my mom heard that song on the way to the hospital and decided to change my name. And I like it. Like, I like it. It just never felt like me, or it was a reflection of me, or like who I am. And I had a spiritual awakening, and kind of changed my life overnight. And I broke up with my boyfriend and quit hanging out with all my friends and stopped smoking and drinking and doing drugs, like pretty much overnight, and quit my job. And I went on a trip, and I kind of just traveled on my own for a few months. And when I came back, I felt like my name was totally not me. It just didn't fit. Like, it felt uncomfortable to try it on, like a shirt that was like 5 sizes too small. And so I didn't have a name for a while. Like, I was just like, I don't know what it is, but it's not that. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to try to figure it out. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, enough is enough. I want my name. What's my name? And I heard this, like, when I was little, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would like think about things, because I was very nocturnal and creative at night. Always, I would like sit outside or in my bedroom and like look at the moon and like kind of talk life through my head, or whatever it was that had woken me up that I was thinking about. And so I kind of was in that space asking this question with the moon. I didn't really make any decisions or like think about it. And then I had gone to a teacher of mine who I was studying with and apprenticing with, and there was a woman there I'd never met. And she goes, "Hi, my name's Miranda. What's your name?" I said, "Hi, my name's Luna." And it just simply came out of my mouth. And then it's been my name ever since that moment. And it just kind of came out, and without a lot of premeditated thought. And the last name just kind of alliteration, and your last name being that which is supposed to describe your occupation just felt appropriate.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Yeah, like shoemaker, and people have different names. Like, they're meant to sometimes denote like location, where your family is from, or occupation. And so they both fit. And I'm getting married, and we're talking about names, and we're doing a hyphenation. So I will become Luna Isbell Love, hyphenated. Yeah.
Nice. My last name, Rivera Merriman. Both Rivera and Merriman mean of the river, or of the water. So Rivera is like people of the river, and then Merriman, it's like the mermen, the men, the seafaring, which is interesting, because I feel much more like a forest fairy, but the water always says, "Don't forget about me."
Yeah, it's the medicine that's like the opposite of what you're comfortable with. That brings us back to center.
My understanding is that you're guiding a lot of people through life transformations at this point in your journey. And I'm wondering if you would share some of the things in your life that give you the inner resources to spend so much of your time being present with others who are in active healing process, and may even be identified with their wounds and challenges. Like, if you're spending your day, placing your day, putting your kind of sensitive, empathic vessel in those environments, how do you stay healthy yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have studied and practiced Tantra in different forms for a long time. And for me, the understanding of that word is to be fully and unconditionally equally giving and receiving in each moment, so that there's no separation of, in this moment I'm giving and in this moment I'm receiving, but that they're simply one and the same thing. And that we allow ourselves to do both fully, without like need for the other in return. And so that's kind of my practice and my path. And I've been doing this work in some form or another for 5 or 6 years. And I started mostly in like a spiritual community, like with other spiritual people. And that got really boring really quickly. Just because I felt like there was this almost like addiction to healing that people were experiencing. And when I started working in other more like trauma-based fields, like addiction care, which is where I've spent like a lot of my time practicing. It was so much more rewarding for me to support people who didn't have an understanding of spirituality in like jargon, like Southern California jargon terms of spirituality, which to me is just like, it's just jargon. Yeah, it's just words. Yeah. And some people embody it, and that's always beautiful and surprising and welcome. And for me, it's not that interesting, just the words and the jargon and like the metaphysical aspects of it, if there isn't like this embodied practice of how we can bring those qualities here on earth. Yeah, I just got back from a weekend in prison, and these guys have no language or like construct of language around spirituality. And more of them embody those qualities of kindness and compassion and empathy than I experience in the outside world. And it's so rewarding for me to work with communities like that, work with the incarcerated community, work with at-risk youth, work with people with addiction issues, because there's trauma that I feel in touch with. And my life story has been very different than a lot of those people. And I have my own trauma in my own way, but moving through that in a willingness of just like being a human and not contextualizing it around elevated consciousness, it's just more fun for me. It feels more effective. It feels more, the ripples in the world are bigger for me. And it's not that they are, that's just my experience that I feel. And so it's given me rewards that I want to do it more. But I also feel like there's people who have a capacity to do that and those that don't. And it's not a better than, it's just simply like, I have a capacity to work with trauma and mental illness in a way that like would make other people exhausted and uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so why not use that ability?
From the little that I know about you, you seem to be someone who's taking really good care of themselves. So when you say I have that capacity, and it's not like better or worse than other people, but I have that capacity, it seems to me that capacity comes from somewhere. So I would just love to hear if you think that you're doing things on a daily basis, or specific things or practices or kinds of relationships that directly impacts your ability to do deeper work with people.
Yeah, I take responsibility for myself, and my self-care is for me. And I'm so blessed to receive so much care and nurturance from people in my life and friends and my partner. And at the same time, it's my responsibility. So particularly on an emotional level, I feel like I'm constantly in a day's time, moment to moment, tending to my own needs. And so my deepest intention in my work is to serve others, and from the place of having already served myself. So that if I'm in a session with a client and I'm like dying to go to the bathroom, like I'm not going to just like ignore my body's need to serve somebody else. Like that's just like a simple minutia example, but that comes up on a regular basis. And how many times do we self-sacrifice our needs to be able to support somebody else? Because that's just creating a codependent relationship. And if I'm there supporting people in empowering them to feel confident in their own ability to tend to themselves, like I'm not teaching people specific tools of like, here's my modality. I'm teaching people to cultivate their own inner qualities and ways of being that they already have inside of them to meet life's challenges, meet themselves when crappy stuff happens. And that takes a relationship with self. It takes a really, really intimate relationship with self. And so if I don't have an intimate relationship with myself, then I'm not really effectively teaching. I'm just teaching by knowledge and not wisdom. And so for me, the wisdom is, how can I have a really intimate relationship with myself? And the self-care physically like varies and looks different from day to day, and my energy level and my level of resistance. But on an emotional level, I feel like I'm always tending to my needs, and I'm not relying on other people to do that for me.
I love that. That's one of our definitions of the priestess, or the role of the priestess in my own vocabulary and worldview, is the role of the priestess is to tend space. And there's lots of beautiful different things I could say about what that means, but then I like to also traverse the full spectrum and offer the crassest, easiest to digest vision of what that means to me for women. And is just because there's a penis shaped hole there doesn't mean you get to put something in it. And you can just make all the metaphors you want about that, but just that there's a lot of things and people and forces and energies in the universe that I don't necessarily think have negative intention at all. They're just moving through the spaces that they perceive. So unless you claim your space and you are able to keep it empty and not fill it with just whatever's around, then you'll never be at choice for what you are bringing into the moment or channeling in or doing with your life. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think that that's so beautiful the way you articulated that. And it's not just the space of my being, but the spaces in which I enter. So like when I enter a space, it's a sacred space and I'm tending to it. Like even if I'm at your house, the space around me is my responsibility because I'm a contribution to it. So tending it is like, can we see the entire planet as that space that we're tending to all the time, not just our own vessel?
That's absolutely part of it. I feel like what I see in a lot of women, you were saying there's this addiction to healing in certain communities, and that I think that it's a lot of times a lack of language that prevents us from going beyond. So if what we've known is healing from acute trauma or wounds or day-to-day habits, then we keep calling it that when it's no longer actually that. Like we've gone beyond using that energy for healing, and we're now using it for learning and evolution and engaging. But that your mind does need to catch up the concepts and adjust the language eventually, or it will limit you to kind of being stuck in a cycle, I guess I would say. But when people move beyond the healing and into that more exploratory evolutionary behaviors, I see people taking their place in their, I will even say, like in the universal ecosystem. So that's a really rewarding moment for me when I see people's purpose expanding to include others beyond their nuclear family is often like a first step, or beyond their immediate community to other communities. And then when it becomes planetary priestesses, and then that sense of the planet is in an ecosystem also. And that I do believe we have the capacity to use our body instruments to contribute to the dancing and the balancing of all of that.
Yeah, I think that's the gift of being in this body, is the opportunity to do so. And some of us use this vessel as an opportunity to do so, as an opportunity to tend to that planetary space by embodying the qualities of the divine in our human form. And some are just on a personal mission. And that's great. And I think that those on a personal mission are going through that personal time to get to that place where they can be of greater planetary service. And so it's just part of the journey.
Yeah. Beautifully said. This is not the most earth-shatteringly unique question, but I do want to know, what is your sign, and like what aspects of that do you resonate as true?
I have a Sagittarius sun, and I'm a Cancer rising and a Leo moon. And I really I have a lot of planets in Scorpio. My Venus
What a
is in
fascinating
Scorpio.
combination.
My Venus is in Scorpio, which is like the Black Widow kind of.
Venus in Scorpio.
Pretty intense. But my my sun and my rising are the biggest thing that I think shapes who I am, which is this juxtaposition of travel and home, that I'm constantly in my life navigating. Like, I want to be free. I want to nest and have a place. I want to travel. I need a home. And when I was a kid, my parents were divorced, and my mom was like home and stability and school. And my dad was big school breaks and vacation and travel. And that's when I would see him. So I had that need met for me unknowingly, that it was a need. It just perfectly was met. And then as I became an adult and tending to those needs myself of home and structure and consistency, and then the balance of travel, it's still a dance for me. It's like a challenge to navigate all the time. And this year's been a lot of travel, and it's travel in the sense of traveling the world and being in new places and cultures and meeting people and food. I love food. And also travel in the sense of like freedom. And so as I get into commitments and relationships and business and engagement and marriage and all these things, like the idea of freedom is like a huge thing for me that that like brings up so much. And it can, in the past, is like that need, that like Sagittarius need for endless freedom has pushed things that I could have committed to that may have been beneficial away. and so I'm learning how to like find the freedom in the commitment. Like the idea of like marriage and kids feels cumbersome in a way, and it's something that I really am moved by and illuminates me and makes me feel really alive and supported in my life. And at the same time, it's something that I can be really afraid of, because I'm afraid that with those things that I don't have as much freedom. And I think that it's the beauty in finding my freedom in those situations that's going to help me grow even more, because okay, I've pretty much mastered feeling free, not being responsible for other people. So can I do that? Can I continue to feel that freedom with responsibility to others?
Searching and home, what's been found, I'm not stopping. I'm going hunting. I'm the hunter. I'll bring back the goods, but I don't know when.
I'm really happy to hear you touch on that, because I mean, I guess it all depends who you're talking to or kinds of conversations you're having, but I feel that there's a lot of stagnation in the dialogue around relationships and children and marriage, and still a lot of very like black and white lines being drawn around like, oh, do you want kids or do you not want kids, or do you want to get married, and if not, why not? Is there something wrong with you? Are you avoiding commitment? And this idea that anybody who doesn't want to get married to anyone at any time is like the first sort of conversation that gets had about it is like, oh, they're not showing up, they're not stepping up, and like there's no other reasons or soul callings or higher level purpose behind people's resistance to getting married and having children. And
yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's always resistance. Like sometimes it's just the clarity of knowing, like, this isn't for me at this time.
yeah. And so I can look back at my life and really admit that when I was much younger and I just really didn't understand relationships, I was so judgmental of men who didn't want to be more serious with me. And I feel like just in the past couple years, I've put aside my hurt or disappointment or judgments enough to just be really curious. Like, who was that person? Who was in there? Like, what archetypes of the masculine or like divine masculine energies, flavors of the masculine were flowing through over there, and realize there's actually a pretty specific archetype, and that archetype has no business getting married or having kids, and they know it. And so they're just kind of like, just like, I have all these other gifts and talents. If you want to do that, we could do that for days. Yeah, just enjoying hearing any kind of dialogue that feels like people are consciously asking themselves who they are and what kind of relationship is right for their soul's needs.
Yeah, and it was not this way. Like I was definitely not a young girl who like dreamed about getting married and like thought about it. I actually never thought that I would or wanted to. And kids was always something that I was like, well, you know, if I'll become a mom, then I'll become a mom. And if I don't, that's totally cool too. Like I don't really have preference. And it wasn't like, it was a very present calling. Like the relationship and the energy of the child is what changed that. What changed that for me. And it's just like, great, I'm just meeting life as it's showing up at my door.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even in that moment of like being proposed to, it's like there's so much fear and there's like the deepest heartfelt yes. And so it's just like, I'm just meeting life as it comes. And it feels really good to trust myself from the relationship I've built with myself, that I'm willing to ask those questions like you're talking about. And it doesn't have to look normal, and like it kind of does, and that's okay too.
I love that. It doesn't have to, but sometimes that's just what happens, and whatever. So I had gotten excited and reached out to you when I saw that you were offering a course in emotional mastery. So it just feels so important. I feel like people are pretty uncomfortable with their lack of skill in the emotions department to navigate the relationships that their souls choose and the people their souls draw them toward. Then we're like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do with this or any of these feelings at all. And I've been just thinking about the words emotional mastery as this interview drew closer and what that might mean for me. And what came up was a sense that I can look back on earlier times in my life, particularly my teens and early 20s, where I felt genuinely enslaved by my emotions. I felt possessed by my emotions. And I remember having a YMCA camp counselor when I was 16, and they were 19, and they were writing a review for our little leadership summer program. And they said, what was it? Emotional almost to the point of overshadowing all other leadership qualities. You're 16, you have no idea. Like, this is your first starting to receive feedback for your adult personality coming through. And my father would say that I was trying to manipulate him if I cried. If I ever cried, you're manipulating me. And so I got a lot of messages right away that were just like, it's your job to conceal whatever's going on over there to make me more comfortable. And I think a lot of people get that message in one way or another, or in many ways. So I'm just curious to hear, your thoughts as someone who has clearly been studying this and asking questions and questing information about tools for emotional health for a long time. I think a lot of people have maybe never heard someone define, like, what are your emotions? Why are they important? Basically, the conversation, if I was 9 and really inquisitive and was like, hey, Mom, I'm feeling this stuff and I don't know what it is. Like, what? And you were to get the opportunity to tell someone for the first time a real definition of what your emotions are and why they're important and what to do with them.
I love this. Their physiology. It's super simple. Emotions are physical responses to our thoughts. And we've had this vocabulary of like names that we've attributed to physical responses, like sadness and anger and frustration and ecstatic bliss and all these things. But it's simply just sensation in our body. Contraction, like a teacher of mine once said, anxiety is just excitement without the breath. And not all anxiety, I think, fits into that, but I understood it, which was just like, if you were breathing fully and not like hyperventilating or not wanting to feel the intensity of the excitement because of whatever stories in the mind don't allow us to, that are like trying to keep us safe from feeling the fullness of our excitement, then it might feel different in your body. So for me, emotions are simply physiology. They're a beautiful way that the body is responding. And so often in my work, it's like, okay, and how do you feel in your body? Is like a question that I'm constantly asking my clients, is because the mind wants to say, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then I felt this way, and then this made me feel this way, which is like a statement I hear all the time. And it's like, okay, great. And how do you feel in your body right now? And how did you feel in your body when that happened? Because that's what we're in relationship with. And so for me, when we can build a relationship with our emotions from a place of being in relationship with them, being in our body, being embodied enough to feel, being intimate with ourselves enough to feel what's going on inside that's informing us of what we're able to do, where we're able to go from here, what we're ready to look at, what we're ready to acknowledge. Like the body is just simply saying, hey, look at this thing, by giving you physical sensations that allow you to look at things. And so often we don't understand that our body's response, we're overwhelmed by it. We'd love if everything was just like neutral all the time, or we just didn't go down to like what feels like negative emotions, or people would say negative emotions, and we could stay like up and like, well, if I'm just like happy and at peace all the time. But it's going down into the physiology that is contractive or uncomfortable, that allows us to feel the amazing bliss of when it's open and expansive and spacious and alive and exciting. And so for me, I think if we as kids were constantly in a relationship with our body and not sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day at a school trying to memorize stuff, that we'd have a very different experience. And what I hear more than ever people crave is connection. We can't have connection with others if we don't have a connection with ourselves. And our connection with ourselves, intimacy with ourselves, first and foremost for me, means being extremely present with what sensations are going on in my body. Thoughts, emotions, feelings, physical sensations, like what's going on, because all of that is telling me how I'm feeling in this moment. All of that is telling me what I'm ready to look at. All of that is telling me how I can go deeper and how I can be even more intimate with myself by feeling that thing. And so for me, it's always about intimacy and being in the body enough so that we can feel it. And then when we don't leave the body, when these uncomfortable things come up, because I think that we're trained to, because it doesn't feel safe, or like safety in the form of, like you were saying, like rejected or told that your emotions made other people feel uncomfortable. And so people feeling uncomfortable means that they're withholding love in a way. They're withholding the fullness of themselves in relationship with you. And what we crave so deeply is connection. So we create this thought system that says, well, if I show this part of myself, then I'm not going to get the connection that I want. So if I just maintain this type of behavior or personality, then I can receive that. But it's at the expense of not having that intimate relationship with ourselves, not having that connection with the fullness of who we are in service to serving somebody else and getting love from somewhere else. So emotions are physiological responses to thoughts, and being in our body and being in relationship to them is a really helpful way to meet them and to just see them as allies, and even use them to go deeper into our bodies. And I'm aware that there's a lot of work in all the traumas and things that people have experienced where it says that it's not safe to feel those things, that we all have to work on in order to be with ourselves, have healthy relationships with others, and be able to meet the intense human traumas and things that are going on in the world. Like, if we can't even be with our own emotions, how are we ever going to deal with like white supremacy?
Yeah, that's definitely where I go with a lot of these things too. You're bringing up in terms of why are our emotions important, that most people seeking guidance in some way are asking for help feeling more connection and more intimacy with their life and engagement with everything. But I do take that into the specific intimacy of sexual relationship and a lot of my inquiry, and just being a person in these times where there's so very much dialogue around accessing sex, like getting sex, and how do you get the sex you want, or in the amount you want, or with who you want. And I feel that so much of those, 10 steps or technologies and techniques, they completely miss what to me is the main point, which is more what you're talking about, where if you're not in your body, then whatever you're doing with another person or to another person is just an idea that you had that's disconnected from the moment entirely. And whatever you think you want is also just an idea, probably, that you were told that you want and you need to get. And if you can't get it, then it means something about you. Where if you're really truly comfortable with your emotions and the sensations of being in your body, whatever's arising, then you get to go into those deeper places with another person, because you're not, basically, no technique is needed. You just need to not resist flowing into those deeper spaces. And so we resist flowing into those deeper spaces when we're like, I don't know what I'm going to feel. But if you were in your own body, you would kind of know what you were going to feel, and you'd be familiar with it, and you'd know what you liked and didn't like and how to swim around in it. So I feel like this emotional mastery, as it relates to physical relating, is so important. And I wish that there was a lot more conversations happening about that relationship.
Yeah, I like a lot of David Data's work for that. I think it really addresses some of the emotional pieces in relationship that we can meet. And for myself, there's like, it's physiological. So I'm so deeply in relationship with my body. So like in a sexual encounter, it's like, well, I have trauma stored in my vaginal canal and my vaginal walls. And like, there's pain because it's informing me that there's something to heal and look at and honor and go deeper within. And so like, okay, if I can, I think it's also that, I'm going to be a little tangential, but it's also like, we're talking about, creating safe space for people, and we're shifting that relationship from safe space to brave space in a lot of like social justice conversations, because it's not a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not anybody else's responsibility to create safety for you. It's your responsibility to feel safe within your own being.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can decide what to do from there. But it's about being brave enough to feel what's going on inside your own being. And sometimes being in a non-safe space is going to allow us to feel something in our body. And simply feeling it is going to be a brave act. And so in a sexual arena, for me, it's like, am I willing to feel safe within myself to allow these sensations to be felt? And then if I am, then I can like bring them into the space. And I'm blessed to have a relationship where it is welcome. And there are lots of people who just have no idea what to do with that. And it's not their responsibility to know what to do with it. It's my responsibility to have the willingness to feel it. And that's that bravery and that willingness to feel the discomfort and the pain and the sensation and the physical feelings and emotions that are physiologically felt in our bodies is really step one. Like the willingness to feel what's inside of myself, even if I'm not in a safe space. Because it's not. The world is not always going to provide a safe space. But our vessels alone, being in them, can we give ourselves permission to be intimate with ourselves?
Yeah, I did. I had someone ask me recently, why do you still trust me? And what came out in that moment was like, well, like I'm not even concerning myself with if I trust you. I'm deeply tuned in with myself and my own needs, and whether or not I feel I can meet them in the way that we're engaging. So, and I'm good with that. So, um,
And
I
that's super wise. Like most people don't come from that space. Most people are in the blame game of like, I don't trust you and you make me feel this way. So just you, I mean, that's a signification of like your development, that's even where you would go in that space.
well, I think I don't know what it is about my contract or my sign or my shaping of my personality, but I do tend to go into really extreme places to learn and to be, I guess, maybe have certain things triggered or stimulated or brought up for me so that I can like really make sure I'm staying on top of my own inner process, I guess. But I've had really, really unsafe teachers. Like most of my teachers are not people that I would send someone to, a new person to, and say, this person's great. You know, people who do ethically questionable things and like throw things at their apprentices. And I don't know that I would continue to seek that. There's a sense of just that's what came in at that time in my life, and I met it and I made my medicine or my wisdom from it. But I have, I guess I would say, had the blessing of having had many opportunities to find safety in unsafe spaces out of sheer necessity that now help me to go where I feel I'm needed. Yeah. So I guess it's sort of vaguely related to what gives you the capacity to go where you feel you need to go to do your work. What goddesses do you most relate to?
Ah, yeah. I used to spend a lot of time in this world and lead moon ceremonies and work with the goddesses and where the moon was at and what goddess it was invoking. And I kind of stepped away from this world, and I recently just led a retreat in Greece called the Trinity Initiation. Was very much with like the Sophia, Isis, Magdalene lineage, and was like, I understand and value archetypes because I work with the medicine wheel as a compass for my life. And so it's simply like the hero and heroine's journey going around the wheel again and again and again. And so there's different archetypes that I resonate with at different times. And I would say right now in my life and in the world, because of what's happening in the world, I would say Lilith is someone who I feel really embodies the void of the feminine in a way that she can like consume all of this. And that my ability to hold it all and consume it all and transmute it all is something that when I connect with her energy, I can feel and motivates me and supports me and uplifts me to be able to do my work, because it is crazy out there. And like, no matter what the patriarchy or anybody else, like, I know how much power within myself I have as a woman, and within the immense energy of the void and Shakti that exists within me to meet everything, no matter, like, nothing is bigger than that. And so I feel like she really embodies that, and is someone that I can connect with that has been really misunderstood and been misrepresented in our culture. And at the same time, like, Mary Magdalene is my homegirl. I mean, just the level of service and willingness to know that you're coming into a life to be an equal to someone like Yeshua, and to not get any credit for it, and to be called a whore for 2,000 years, and like know that, and still choose that life, and still choose to be of service, and still choose to show up and start orphanages and hospice centers and help someone, you know, with the sepulcher, and like rise from the dead. Like none of that would have been possible without this woman's immense capacity and willingness and strength to not need any credit or need any acknowledgement, and just to like be of service to humanity in that way is like super inspiring for me, and like helpful for me to like be humble. Yeah, those two are the ones that come to mind, and I think in my life they come up as needed, and so different situations may invoke a different quality or energy that's needed at that time, but at the moment those are the two that I'm really present to.
Awesome. Thank you. Another thing I guess I just wanted to add that's been helpful to me is that I have a teacher who's very, very clear. Anytime I try to call the goddesses archetypes, she just cuts me off right away. They're not archetypes. They're living fields of consciousness. And I kind of argue back. I'm like, well, to me, when I use the word archetype, I am not thinking it's not alive. I think every story and every myth and every tarot card is alive. So it sort of becomes a semantics thing, but it's just a helpful thing to think about is when considering whether or not goddess study could be of value, that it's not just a matter of learning, like teaching tales that help you learn how to be a person, that you're actually, when you say their name, when you read about them, when you give your attention to them, you are accessing living fields of consciousness that are ancient and available to us to shift really massive things on the personality level. And that's kind of why I'm always bringing this up with everyone.
No, I like that. It's a good like language awareness shift, because I agree with it. And I've seen and know the immense power of feeling that living presence supporting and guiding my life at different times. And yeah, I think that their living presence has created the archetypes that we can associate with. But yeah, I like that shift. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So circling back to this emotional mastery training, we kind of got into what are the emotions, why are the emotions important. I'm curious how you're defining emotional mastery.
Yeah, so I'm defining it as a path that we can devote ourselves to walking. And for me, a path of mastery is a commitment. It's not like, oh, and I got this blue accreditation and that means this. It's really like there's no end, but it's a path that I'm devoted to developing my mastery in. And it's endless and constantly teaching us, but it's a commitment. It's not something that like, oh, I took all these classes and I got a certificate and now I'm a master. It's like I'm devoted to walking this every day and using everything that comes up to support me in deepening in my mastery in this field. And for me, this has been the most profound commitment that I've been devoted to, including because it's just for me the foundation of everything. Like how I feel is the foundation of everything, and it affects my relationships with myself, it affects my work, it affects my relationships with others. It's the everything. It, you know, when I'm saying it's physiology, it's only part, like it is the human experience is to feel those things through our body and to use this embodiment to develop and to grow and to be of greatest service. And for me, that's been the path in which I've committed to, that's been the most effective. And there have been other paths in which I have walked for times and stepped off those paths, and others that I've been more committed to. And for me, this path of emotional mastery is the thing that gives me the greatest sense of freedom. Because that's all about me. Like, it's not about anybody else.
Thank you. It sounds like you're defining emotional mastery as a practice.
Yeah, it's something that I'm committed to practicing daily, and like messing up and like learning from that and practicing. Like for me, that's mastery. It's not someone who has it all figured out. It's someone who, like, I don't think anyone in a field of like, say, like swordsmanship, like Japanese sword fighting, people are known as masters, but it doesn't mean that they know everything. It means that they know they've devoted themselves enough to get to a certain level, but they're constantly learning and refining and using every single thing that comes up to refine that wisdom and to develop it. And so, and if there was anyone who was just like, oh, I know it all and I'm a master, like, they're obviously not.
Yeah.
Because, you know, so for me, it's a path.
Awesome. Well, I don't know. Personally, I just want to say thank you for choosing that path, because it feels really important to me too. And I can feel that you're really walking that and committed to continuing to learn and share with others. And I just think it's so necessary. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, I appreciate it.
So I'm curious if you have anything to share about, if just from your unique perspective of thinking about the emotions, maybe more than your average person, the relationship between the emotions and seasons or planetary weather patterns.
Awesome. So I have this thing that I found in living in Los Angeles. I know you live in San Diego. But in the Southern California, I grew up in New York, so I had 4 seasons that were very defined. And I noticed that in just the culture, like, so then I moved to the West Coast about 9 or 10 years ago. And I lived in Southern California, and I would go up to Washington and Oregon and the Pacific Northwest and be with people there. And it was a different culture. There was like a gravity to the people and a sense of self exploration that I wasn't finding in the same ways in Southern California. And self-exploration is definitely a part of Southern California culture, but in this kind of spiritual way in which I was speaking of before, like being addicted to like workshops and the next thing. And that's not everyone. And what I found was that like seasonal bypass is spiritual bypass. So winter is so powerful because it supports us in going inside. And there are cultures in other places that live in tropical cultures, like in the Caribbean, for example, that they have ritual and tradition which supports people going into those spaces that winter invites without necessarily needing that season to do that. And so I find that when we don't have a culture with rituals and tools and ways of being and traditions passed down that help us go into the more introspective spaces, which winter also invites and nighttime also invites, that we really need the seasons to help us. And particularly in a Western culture, we just don't really have those traditions at all. And so when the seasons are like constantly like rainy and cold and dark and like the majority of life, that affects our emotions. And when it's constantly sunny and always bright and like barely ever rains or is cold, that also dramatically affects us. And I think the 4 seasons are shown to us and given to us. And this planet is, I totally believe that we live in a benevolent universe where everything is in service to supporting the evolution of humanity and life on the planet, whatever that life looks like. And so if it's supporting us. And so culturally we can find ways to do that, but the seasons really support us. And so I find that a lot of times people resist that, that going deep within, and it's just minor. So like someone in a Southern California area or another area like Florida, it gets colder. It's like different, the seasons do change, but it's so subtle. And for me, it's just like the depth of experience. Like when it's like a drastic snowstorm and you're stuck inside and you've got to like keep a fireplace going, it does something to strengthen the emotional body and the tenacity and the spirit of the person in a way in which you're getting that support annually to go inside, to stay inside. It's not a time like summer where you're out socializing. It's a time where you're like with yourself, that you're cozy, that you have to go within. You have to look at these things that kind of come up. And there's like depression that happens in the winter, and it's not a bad thing. It's just simply like supporting us to go inside ourselves. And when we resist it, it can create effects. Like any emotion that we resist is going to create an effect of dis-ease in the body.
Something that I find myself quoting a lot, I'm not sure if he made it up, but I first heard it from the yoga teacher Mark Whitwell, just breaking down the word depressed to deep rest. And I find that so helpful for ways that, pretty much the first day of fall, I can just switch from months of feeling fine about life and excited and creative, just waking up in the morning feeling like someone died, just waking up feeling really filled with sadness or grief. And I'm always surprised every year at like just how stark that switch is. And I think it can be scary, be like, oh gosh, now I'm depressed now. And that languaging really helps me just to think, well, yeah, what does that really mean? It just means I don't want to do anything. And maybe it's because I shouldn't do anything. I should stop doing stuff and just like be with myself and notice how big that laundry pile is, or notice the little things around my house or in my space and like attend to the minutia.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a difference between like being aware of the physiology in the body and being aware of the thoughts. Because sometimes in that deep rest, we'll rest, and then there'll be like that voice that says, "Ooh, and now I should really actually get up and do that laundry." But then the mind is like, oh, but I feel this way and I feel that way. And it's like, no, actually you just had this like burst of energy and inspiration. And so I think that it's good to be present with the body, not the mind, as a way of doing, as a way of seeing our needs and assessing our needs,
Mm.
because the mind is really tricky and confusing, but the body never lies. And the more, stagnancy is the root of all disease. So when things are not moving, and so if there's rest, is there still movement in our life? Like movement can be creative, it can be the sense of self-love, like an energy that flows through us, like that is movement. Like if you're giving yourself rest from this place of like care for yourself, there's an energy of love moving through your body that is moving. But when there's a sense of deep rest as like stagnancy and avoidance and those kinds of things, it's a totally different sensation in our body, physically. And
Yeah.
so I just go back to like being in the body to assess that.
We have to start wrapping up, but there's like one question I really wanted to ask you before we do. Which is just something around, we're talking about how the emotions are so important and that mastery feels really relevant to both of us as like connected to everything else and our capacity to give back or do anything, enjoy ourselves, be present, be of service. So just another level of specificity around that. I really feel very present to how much heartbreak can just derail us for like years of our life. And so I have ideas around what heartbreak is, the main one just being like that it should be classified as a serious disease with certain characteristics and parts that feed into it. Like it's a real underlying cause of most physical diseases that I come across, and maybe that's just an indication of what I'm here to do, but would just like to hear, what do you think heartbreak is, and do you feel like choosing a path of emotional mastery in the moment can like in some way go back in time and like rewrite the stories that generate the physical aspects of heartbreak in the present? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I love that you asked this. I mean, this is kind of my favorite topic because as I hear you saying heartbreak, I'm translating it as grief, which is my favorite emotion and like my buddy. And so from my experience, I would say absolutely. Like my relationship with grief as an ally has dramatically shifted how I experience loss, as it happens again in life, because I think culturally we just have no traditions or rituals or context for relating to grief in our culture. And so we meet loss, and like we're a culture that like doesn't talk about death and like lives in this like ideal like American dream and like the bubble of love and romantic movies and all the things that we're gonna find and do and create that are like in this positive light. And there isn't really a lot of time spent in the area of, well, what about when it's not like that? And how do we meet that? And so for me, that's the area of grief. That's where loss happens. And we meet loss on a regular basis, like the job that we wanted, or the girl that we asked out, or a ring that was left in a department store changing room, like all the things that we lose, including loved ones, including relationships, including homes in natural disasters, like all the things that we lose. And there's a lot of cultures have ongoing ways of being that support us losing things in a way that does not make us incapacitated. And I've been in that place of having loss through death of a loved one and miscarriage and breakup, romantic breakup, but like I've had all of that like all happen at the same time and totally be like feeling like I'm incapacitated, like I can't even exist in the world. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had that has shaped who I am today, when I finally just let myself feel all the feelings without a story around it.
I wake you up in the night, feeling this is our last time together. Therefore, sensing all the moments we've been together, being here at the same time. Every single touch we ever touch each other, every single fuck we had together is in a wondrous time lapse, with us here at this moment. The history of touches, every single archive compressed into a second, all with us here as I wake you up.
And now grief has like become such an ally for me. And it's not about the story, because for me, what I found after the fact, after going through all of that, is that grief and loss and heartbreak are simply just supporting me in discovering who I am without my identifications to things outside of myself. So like that house, that job, that lover, that child, that person in my life, like when they go away, who am I? That's really what I feel like grief is the discovery. It's like the death of our own identity. It's not necessarily the person or the thing that we're losing, as much as like, well, if they're not here, who the hell am I? Because I've created my identity based on this relationship to this outside thing that is not who I truly am. And grief is simply just supporting us in helping us discover what that true identification of self is without all those outside things. And it's not that we don't need those things. They're beautiful. And they're not who we are. They don't make us who we are. We are divine children, pure and innocent. And yeah, that's our identity. And when we get caught up in like, well, I'm a wife, I'm this person's wife, and they're a doctor, and that means this about me and us. It's like, well, then that might have to be shed for you to really discover who you truly are. And that's just part of life. It's part of, if everything was only being created and never destroyed, like if we're only breathing in, if the world was only expanding and not contracting, like we have to have those moments. And it's, for me, death or heartbreak or loss or grief, it's just simply a transition of form. So when someone dies, they're just transitioning out of physical form into a different form. And the same with a house that burns in a fire, like it's transitioning form. And so we don't really lose it. It just changes form. Our memories, our experiences are the same. But we can get into the mind, which is like, but now I'm not going to feel this way without this thing in my life. And that's really what I feel like heartbreak is like the discovery of ourselves and the parts of ourselves that were not us, that we've created, that are dying. And the physical representations of those things and those attachments to those identities happen to be in others or jobs or houses or things. And so when they go, we get to really find ourselves. And so I totally believe that we can use those experiences as a way to deepen in our emotional mastery and help support it. It doesn't mean that we'll never meet loss again, but it means that we can maybe approach it differently the next time it happens.
Do you have a ritual or go-to tool or practice when you experience loss and maybe you're really busy, or maybe you're in the middle of like a huge retreat and you feel that you want to put that loss to the side for a minute and complete your agreements. We all have moments like that in life where we feel we want to show up in a certain way, and so maybe we say, okay, I'm gonna feel this, I'm gonna feel this, but it can't do it right now. And then by the time maybe you're home and you have the time and space to feel it, it's got buried and it's a little
I
less
don't feel that way anymore.
accessible. Yeah, and that maybe you're just having extra crampy periods, or finding yourself feeling really irritable or less generous with people in conversation, and then a little light bulb goes on and you say, oh, I kind of have that feeling like I could cry at any moment, but I can't quite do it. Like, what are your ways of saying, all right, I know that I have some grieving to do and I'm going to go there? Or is that something you even do?
Yeah, for sure. I have no problem crying in public spaces. Like I could just totally be like in like a heavy, deep cry in a supermarket and be like, okay, well, this is just what needs to happen right now. Like I was at a conference and like the whole day I was just feeling waves of grief, and like it was not letting up. It was not stopping. It wasn't related to anything. There was no story around it. It was just like intense. And I just sat in the audience and I cried, and like people around me were probably uncomfortable, but like I don't really care that they're uncomfortable. Like it's fine. Like it's fine. Like it's healthy. And it probably gave a lot of people permission in their own way, maybe, and maybe not. Maybe they were just uncomfortable, and that's fine too. But I felt like, okay, well, like, how can I be in this space? Do I feel like I'm not detracting? I'm not like hysterical screaming and like taking the energy from the room because I need it for myself. I'm tending to myself. I'm just tending to my own needs, which is to have a good cry right now. And then I was like, okay, this is feeling like I need to excuse myself. So I just went outside. And there are times when like, yeah, there's been like one or two times when I was just in it, and I had like, it came out of nowhere, and I just really needed to feel deeply. And I had a call with a client, and I like tried to get myself together, and I like couldn't. And I was like, hey, I need to reschedule. I'm like having a really hard time. And she was like, okay, no worries. Yeah, of course. For me, it's about like, I'm tending to myself. And when I'm tending to myself, I don't need anybody else to give me permission to do that. And so it's like definitely taking the time, having the good cries, journaling, like writing, even just writing on a piece of paper, like, I don't want to feel this. This is stupid. I don't even want to be writing right now. Sometimes like helps anger and upset and frustration and all the emotions underneath to come forward. So yeah, there's definitely those times that are like, oh, I'll deal with this later. And then I live life and I have my day, and then I go home and I'm like, oh, I don't feel that way anymore. It's gone. And it's really not gone.
Yeah.
You know? So in the moment is always best. And if in the moment can't happen, for me, it doesn't need to look a certain way. So I don't necessarily need to be like having this cathartic expression. I can honor that grief is happening in my body, or sadness or upset or disappointment or whatever is happening in my body, without needing it to be expressed in this like, or ecstatic bliss. Like there are appropriate ways in which there's a time and a space for that to be expressed in its fullest, most embodied expression. And then there are times when like you could get arrested, like, so I'm aware of my environment. I'm aware that my choices of expression don't exist inside of a vacuum and affect others. And as long as I'm not harming others or putting myself in danger by how people might perceive me, then I feel okay to express it. And when that's not possible, a simple internal acknowledgement is equally as valuable, of just like taking a deep breath with my eyes closed and saying to the part of myself that feels a certain way, like, I see you, and like, I'm not gonna avoid this, and I'm gonna come back to this later. And just taking that breath and coming back to whatever it is that I'm doing, and just like letting it kind of hang out with me. Like, as long as it's not making my choices for me and it's not trying to take control and drive the car, it's welcome to be here. So, I
love that caveat. You're welcome to hang out as long as you're not trying to drive the car.
Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I love talking about feelings with you.
Yay! I love talking about feelings.
So, did just want to share with listeners, if they also are enjoying talking about feelings with you, that they can explore more of what you have to offer by visiting lunaloveleadership.com, or you can also check out Luna's podcast, Ladies Who Lead, at www.ladieswholeadpodcast.com. And just a formal thank you to you, Luna, and to all the benevolent beings and all the realms who've gathered here today to inspire and direct the flow of this conversation. We dedicate any merits accumulated through this work to the benefit of all sentient beings. May all beings be healthy, may all beings be well, may all beings know joy and not suffer. Jai Ma, Amen, Namaste, blessed be, Aho, why not? May it be finished in beauty.
We recognize you, we remember you, we have so much catching up to do. Thank you for coming back and not forgetting about this time, taking time to make space for walking passage through all of your information, coming on Podbean, celebrations on time, showing up with our vibration, showing up for one of us. Beloved, it's been 1,000 years, love, dry tears, we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here, we're here.